programs. There are a 3-year integrated government development plan that is the basis of producing the 3-year budget that gets approved in Parliament. We need to be moving aggressively to make sure that we stay the course. We implement these reforms. We don't backtrack from that. We don't keep reinventing the wheel. We don't keep relaunching different documents every 2 years because we're fed up and we park the strategy on the shelf and so on. We stay the course on that, and within that overall high-level roadmap, I think what's going to be critical to get us there is the growth plan we have put in place, the human resource development strategy that is at the core of what makes Jordan different competitively, investing in our people, the digitization and e-government to transform government, and the full implementation of the Royal Commission on enhancing integrity and the rule of law, where we've pushed a huge package through Parliament, 13 critical judicial laws that need to be now implemented fully with bylaws and instructions through the judiciary and enforced fully to move us to the direction where we're achieving that. My message to all our private sector is the road is hard. There are no easy solutions. We're going to have to push hard on parallel tracks and sequentially to move Jordan to the paradigm shift we have envisaged in the Jordan 2025. I'm pleased to tell all our colleagues and partners in the private sector that at the government level, in partnership with all the donors, all the international financial institutions, we have designed a preliminary 5-year matrix in parallel tracks and sequentially of the critical reforms that we need to do, like the current secured lending law, which is in Parliament, in the Parliamentary Legal Committee that we're pushing very hard to complete because it produces critical access to finance to our private sector, like the bankruptcy law that we're about to finish rewriting. We pulled it out of Parliament because it didn't have the best practice principles, and we're going to issue it within the next 2 weeks back to Parliament in expedited. We have a very aggressive agenda of reforms that we need to push very hard to transform and make sure Jordan goes to the vision I have articulated, which is very well mentioned. And I remind everyone, please go back to the Jordan 2025, use it in your lobbying as the private sector with government, and let's all of us do the roles that have been carved out for each one of us within that roadmap that we have put for the country.
We're nearly out of time, so I suppose I come to what is the pivotal question about these types of these plans and the steps that you're taking with the legal system and the government and all of that is, when are the people going to see the difference? Because it's never easy for government. I'm not a believer in that governments are bad, but sometimes it takes more time than governments admit for the effects of their policies to come through. And there's only so much promising one can do before you run out of road. And I think some of your regional colleagues, perhaps, I'm not going to mention names, but I think you probably know who they are, I feel are slightly over-promising, and are going to get to a point in a couple of years where they've made these big promises and they're not going to be able to deliver them, and that's going to cause them problems. Not significant problems, but problems. So delivery. I get the feeling that you're now going from the planning to the delivery.
To the delivery, agreed.
So talk a little bit about that and how you see this thing being delivered and when it'll make a difference.
I think one of the biggest weaknesses we've seen historically in Jordan is the delivery part in terms of strategic plans for the country and moving that forward. What we're trying to do differently this time is one, launching the delivery unit at the center of government, which is at the Prime Ministry. Dedicating enough resources to it so that it can track the implementation of the strategic pillars within these plans. We're tying in the budgets to the priorities within these plans, and what's outside that should no longer be funded by the government budget. We have all our international key development partners working with us on an aggressive 5-year employment and growth policy reform matrix, where they're also promising to provide additional aid in return for incentivizing the government to be more aggressive on taking their necessary reforms horizontally and vertically, and in the right sequence. So I think we have, and we have also the reality that we have to be self-reliant. We can no longer think that somebody's going to come and give us a big amount, budget support, and close the gap in the budget. We're going to have to do this on our own. And I think that reality has become entrenched. On the resilience side, I'm optimistic because Jordan, to a large extent, exited the subsidy system. So we moved away from subsidizing electricity, oil products, bread, and we redirected subsidies to Jordanians who deserve that. And that's a much better, efficient system for the market, much more impactful, because there was a huge amount of waste, or you're having a lot of people that don't deserve the subsidies that were benefiting from that. So on the fiscal resilience side, and once we see through the last part of this fiscal reform program that probably the Minister of Finance and the central bank government discussed, I think we'll be in a good position where we want to make sure that this alignment of development partners, the public's awareness, the private sector pressure on government, parliamentary pressure on government, and the lessons learned from prior experiences, hopefully we try to do this differently going forward, with the right elements falling in place to get us to make sure that we're delivering. I want to mention one thing. I think government and private sector have to also have the right expectations. Let's be very realistic.
Yes.
So the government fiscally, for a few years, is not going to have big capital expenditure programs. And we're in austerity. And that's anti-growth by definition. On the monetary side, we have an interest rate environment globally, and we're pegged to the dollar, where interest rates are going to be going up. That's also going to be anti-growth to some extent. So the way in our plans we try to bypass these two constraints, and these are very big constraints. You ask the businesses, and they'll tell you that these are big constraints. So that's why I'm someone that doesn't want to overpromise. I think it's going to take us several years to go up slowly from the average 2% growth. You know, we've been growing at less than 1/3 the rate from 2011 to 2017 compared from 2000 to 2010. You know, 6.7 versus 2.1. That's a massive low growth rate. I think the other period where we've had that bad growth was 1967 to 73. I looked historically at the numbers. So this is unprecedented since a long time, and the size fiscally has been massive. So to bypass these two things, we need a strong push on implementing the reform, especially deregulation. I think we're over-regulating the economy and many sectors. That's going to require a strong partnership between government, private sector, and parliament to get this sorted out so that businesses see an improvement and ability to maneuver. And I've always been a champion of, you know, less government in these areas. We're going to have to maximize doing our capital expenditure as government, not from the treasury, but through public-private partnerships. And listen, Jordan in the past 10 years did $10 billion of PPPs at very difficult circumstances. So we have a good track record and we can do it. And finally, on the constraints of increasing interest rates, we're going to work closer as Ministry of Planning with the central bank to get more resources that will be put in the central bank to be given as loans to the bankers who represent this room. So they finance critical clusters or growth sectors that will be instrumental for growth and employment to help us bypass the two constraints of fiscal austerity and an environment of increasing interest rates.
Yeah. So, Minister, we've run out of time, but one final question. So, if we're sitting, and I hope we are, in these chairs or chairs like them in a year's time, what are the priorities that you'd like to see happen, have happened by this time next year? What should be different? What laws should have been passed, changes made, or projects completed or initiated successfully?
I think that we have finished the IMF austerity program, hopefully, and we're towards the end of it next year.
Yep.
I think we would have pushed some of the critical laws through Parliament. Bankruptcy, secured lending are two critical. Today in Parliament, there's a critical law on health accountability or medical accountability. That will be critical for the health tourism segment, and I hope we succeed in pushing that through. I think there will be an announcement and a clear policy matrix of the next 5 years, the donors and the government pushing through the critical reforms we need to do. And I think there'll be also clarity on a pipeline of PPPs and projects that are being tendered out to deliver the capital expenditure. I think there has to be clear reporting through the government on how much we've implemented from the digitization agenda, the Jordan 2025 overall umbrella, and we...
I said one thing.
Yeah, and we report on an annual or semi-annual basis to the public. We've delivered on this. These are the things that are in the red, and these are the things that are still work in progress. So that type of a relationship where we're reporting through the delivery unit on progress against these plans, so the public rebuilds its confidence more back into government processes, that we're heading in the right direction.
Well, Minister, thank you very much. Your energy is extremely impressive, as always, and I'm sure we all feel more confident having listened to you and your commitment to doing this, and we look very much forward to interviewing you again in due course. So, before I let you go for lunch, please join me, don't clap yet, in thanking the Minister, and let me thank you for staying, and this is the close of the conference. So, thank you, Your Excellency. Very good.